'Cause like a winter tonight, I thought I would always have light. The quick flash that you gave to me, so dark I could barely see. Looking
From wherever you are around the world, welcome and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be exploring cult manipulation. That's right. With me is special co-host Kelly Carlson, former Nip Tuck star and movie actress. And our guest today is Diane Benscoter. Diane Benscoter is the founder of Own Your Brain, author of She's of Servant, and acclaimed speaker with over 1 million views of her TED Talk on cult manipulation. So let's welcome to the circle to Miss Benscoter. Welcome, Miss Benscoter.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. This is a fascinating topic. I know we've talked a lot about it.
Absolutely.
Question number one is, what is a cult?
Well, a lot of people try to define what a cult is, and I think sociologists might define it different at different times in history. But really, I find that what's more compelling than whether or not an organization is or is not, does not meet that criteria of what a cult is, I think it's important to look at whether or not an organization is using manipulative tactics to try to control its members, especially those who are most vulnerable to those tactics.
Let me ask you this question. Is defining it, you think it's bad to do that? Does it label some people that may not be cults? Or maybe behind agendas, if people start labeling or defining them?
I think it does in a way, because you could say that any religion has aspects that could be used to control people. You could because religion is often used to control people. You can use a doctrine and say, well, God says to do this, or God says not to do that, and take advantage of people who are not feeling good about themselves and feel like they need someone to answer life's hard questions for them. And so instead of saying all religion is bad, or this particular group is bad and this one isn't, I think that it's more effective to really deconstruct how it's being used to take advantage of people.
Well, she set that one up for you.
Well said.
You wanted to ask her about religion.
Yeah, I mean, but you answered it very nicely. Only because I have a little bit of an adverse reaction to religion, not about how it's presented and taught. But you kind of answered my question. I mean, and I like how you, in your answer, you're freeing up a person to make their own decision, whether or not a church or a religion, is a cult, because you're allowing them to freely decide if they're using these tactics or not. So when you answered the question, I really liked your answer, because you're not telling people, well, this is what it is. You're allowing them to make the decision for themselves.
She answered your question without you even having to ask it.
Right, I know. That's right.
She is good. So, Ms. Benscoter, can you give us a little bit of your background? I know you were in a cult years ago.
I was in the organization founded by Sun Myung Moon and often referred to as the Moonies. When I was in the organization, we embraced that term, but now they've kind of rebranded themselves and are saying that that's a derogatory term, and that they would prefer to be called members of the Unification Church or Unificationalists. But I was 17 when I joined, and I was looking for easy answers to life's hard questions. I was very upset about the Vietnam War, and I was very moved by a lot of the music of that era, and Cat Stevens, and Bob Dylan, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, those people, and songs about ending the war and things moved me, and I wanted to get out and do something about it. And I grew up in a really little town in the middle of the heartland of America in Nebraska, and so I was primed for this. And when I met this organization, they told me how special I was and how God had prepared me for a very special mission. And it made sense to me at that particular point in my life, and they were so excited and they were so charismatic. And so I ended up joining, and I was involved for 5 years. And during those 5 years, My mother especially was frantically trying to reconnect with me because I just left everything behind and went off fundraising, essentially selling candy and flowers on the streets and raising money for who I thought was the second coming of Christ. I thought the Messiah was on the earth and that I was a disciple of Christ. And so I knew that one day my family and everyone would understand why I left them behind and why I was doing this. It wasn't until 5 years later that I was deprogrammed. My mother finally convinced me to talk to somebody, and when I was home, and it was during that deprogramming that things shattered in my mind, and I realized that maybe it wasn't true, and it was very devastating, and it took me a long time to put myself back together. And that's what my book is about. It's my memoir of those years.
Can I ask you a question? I wanted to know who found who? Did the Moonies find you? I know some groups target individuals that are more isolated. They're not in large groups. Or did you find them somehow?
Well, I was walking down the street, and someone handed me a banana with a flyer around it. And the flyer said, it said, "Walk for world peace." And here's Sun Myung Moon speak. And I wanted to be a writer, and I thought maybe this would be a good story. And so I went off on this walk to try to write a story that I thought maybe I could get a paper to publish. And but then during that walk, I ended up joining.
It's a whole different story than you expected, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So now, do they have a criteria or a formula to target individuals? We know ISIS does, and I'm not saying the Moonies are ISIS, but groups like ISIS, for instance, they target individuals they know are isolated. They go to use a computer a lot. They complain a lot. Or they're looking for answers for life, whatever it may be. Have you found that with other groups like this?
I think there's a real parallel between like ISIS and what I went through. When I hear stories of young people going off to Syria, sneaking off away from their parents and joining these groups, they're young people who are highly vulnerable. They see some things on YouTube and that are making them feel empowered, or that there's even video games being produced now by ISIS that
video games?
Yeah, that you can fight the enemy, meaning us, meaning, anyone against ISIS. And any time that you can create an us and them feeling, which happened to me in my organization, and it happens in ISIS, it happens even in relationships where if there's abuse going on in the relationship, there's the same psychological situation going on. And if you can make someone feel like the whole world is against us and we need to stand together and fight the evil, and we are righteous, we are good. There's whole retellings of history. From when I joined the group, history was retold from the perspective of how God was preparing for Sun Myung Moon to come to bring peace on earth. And I just saw a video online produced by ISIS that was retelling history from the perspective of how the Quran and how the people who are Muslim have been put down throughout history and have been attacked, and that violence is required to take back what God wants Muslims to have. And it doesn't, you can replace the title, you can replace the doctrine, you can replace the name of the organization, and the same thing is happening. Somebody who is like me, I was young and I was looking for easy answers. I was feeling a little lost in my world, and I was suddenly felt like my life had value. I had a purpose, and I was fighting evil, and I was going to make the world better. And so those people that run off to ISIS are really good-hearted people who have been fed a line and have been taken advantage of. And the same happened with me, and it happens in many situations.
You know what I compare it to? Asymmetrical warfare, because it's the same tactic if you're talking about a country or whatever, but I attribute it to dealing with psychopaths or in abusive relationships. It's the approach of asymmetrical warfare, except it's on you, where they break down your critical infrastructure. It's a little different, but you're being attacked by your friend and you don't even know it.
So they act like your friend, but they're manipulating you through that kind of medium.
Yeah, and in relationship abuse as well. You could, if somebody's already torn down psychologically, not feeling good about themselves, maybe they've been bullied, maybe they've been told that they're not attractive or that they're a loser, or they feel that way from society. And then someone comes along and takes them in and makes them feel loved, but then continues to tear them down in other ways and show them how they aren't good. But if they stick with them, then they'll have some power. They'll feel better about themselves. Their only salvation is through this person, through this group, through this organization. You begin to believe that, and you begin to feel like that's your life source to anything that matters in the world.
And what they have on their side, the cult, is that people inherently want to be part of a group or a pack. It's your survival instinct. So they just exploit those natural instincts. You're not even aware of it. And they're so powerful. It makes their job so much easier.
That's absolutely true, yeah.
Yes, yeah. If you think about what happened in Boston at the marathon, I mean, here's a young man. If you look at his picture, he just looks innocent and young and like, the kid down the street, and he really is. And, while he was under that boat, writing on the inside of it things about fighting for God, he was just he believed in that moment. In that moment, he believed he was doing God's work.
That's right.
And so it's that, how do we reach out to young people who are feeling isolated and feeling alone and feeling like they don't fit in and feeling powerless, and how do we show them that these are the tactics that will try to take advantage of that? There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with feeling like with having the fullness spectrum of life, the ups and downs. But if we see, especially young people, because the adolescent brain is really at that point where it's changing and growing, and you're becoming yourself, and you're looking for your own identity, and it's a really good time to take advantage of someone if that's what your goal is, and it's a really dangerous time to be taken advantage of if that's you or someone you love.
And I hate to make this sound like a corporate feel, but it sounds like these cults have the marketing skills. You know what I mean? Because these individuals who are looking to connect, they can go a lot of other places. They don't have to go to ISIS. They can go become a Mormon. They can become a Christian. Not to go to their cults, but they can go anywhere they want to feel connected and needed. But it seems that these less desirable groups seem to have very effective marketing tactics to make them more sexy. And
yeah.
Go
Sorry
ahead.
to interrupt you, Carlos. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, I think that what groups like ISIS takes advantage of is anger. And so I think that if somebody is really angry about the fact that they feel like they've been bullied, or they feel like they don't really fit in, or whatever that reason is, maybe they've been abused by somebody or beaten up or whatever, then they oftentimes feel like, here's a way to take out my anger. They want to express their anger, and they're playing video games where they shoot them up. And here's a way that they can actually go someplace and get to do it in real life. And so it's very appealing to somebody who has built up anger and wants to take it out and feel like they're doing it for something righteous.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
If you say to parents, you know, a child's gonna assimilate somewhere. So if your child is being bullied or they feel ostracized, you know, keep in mind they can assimilate to, you know, society or something else, because you are so susceptible and people will naturally assimilate to something. So keep your eye on your child for that reason.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, make them feel valued, make them feel like give them hope that their life has value. Another parallel is gangs.
Totally.
Very much. Skinheads. There's a great book by Frank Mink. He was in Skinheads and is now doing a lot of work, anti-gang work, and great guy, but he was extremely violent and is really regretful for all of the things that he did. But he had been abused as a child. He had been through horrible things, and he was in inner city, and so joining this group made him feel powerful. And look at any of the inner city gangs. Here's kids that oftentimes don't feel like they have hope for a future. They feel like, here's a way that I can have community. Here's a way that I can not feel so alone, that I can feel the strength of others around me becoming part of me. And so it makes sense that someone would join a gang when they're in a situation where they feel so powerless. And then it's hard to get out because you feel like, this is my family, and you become defensive about them.
How does a cult, and I don't know if this happened to you during your 5 years or not, but it overtakes almost your loyalty to your family. At one point, you're in the cult for a year or two. No, don't call your mom. Don't listen to your mom and dad. But they almost overtake the loyalty that you once had, if not overtake it completely. Do you think that's true?
You know, that's a real soft spot in my heart, because it happened to me. I left my family behind for those 5 years, and I caused a lot of pain to loved ones. And yes, they specifically will tell you, at least they use different verbiage. In that particular group I was in, the rhetoric or the dialogue that they used, the narrative was that God will work, or Satan will work through the ones who love you. Satan knows that you're doing God's work, and knows that that is how that he can work most effectively to break you away from God's work, is through your family. So you have to pray harder for them and know that Satan is working through them, and you have to disassociate yourself from them. One day they'll understand, and one day they'll thank you for what you've done. And so I believed it, and it's sad for me, because my mom had breast cancer during that time, and she's fine. She made it through it. She's gone now, unfortunately, but I didn't come home. I wasn't with her during that, and it's something I can never take back. I was the oldest daughter. I should have been there for her, and I wasn't, and something I can never take back. And I would have never done that had I not been in that group. I would have been by her side, of course. Right. But it's those kind of things that I think people who are formers look back and regret.
That's a tough thing. I can't imagine. You wanted to talk a little bit about us-them theory, or did she answer that too before you get a chance?
Yeah. Well, my question getting there would be, first, if I had like only one question to ask you, it would be this. Because I try and do this. When you're reading, let's say, not that you need a self-help book, but what are your red flags? What words, when people are manipulating you with a concept versus teaching you something? Because, you know, they can look so much alike. I look for people that are speaking, to use specific words that should be warning, that is revealing that they're trying to shape my ideas versus encouraging.
I've kind of come to the conclusion that in thinking about, well, why do people do this? What is behind this? And I think it is under the umbrella of addiction. What could be more addicting than power and money? Mm-hmm. And so I think that when someone is addicted to something, then they kind of lose their humanity, and they're willing to do anything to feed their addiction. And so I think this happens when somebody is under that influence of their addiction to power and money and are looking for ways to take advantage of others. If you can get someone to give you their loyalty, then that's a huge asset. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody is trying, and one of the most powerful things, and one of the things I see in a cross section, we've talked about all kinds of different ways this plays out, and one of the things I see in all of them is that us and them piece that you were talking about, Carlos, is that it is about creating an us and them. If you can create an enemy, they are the enemy, they are the problem. We are the answer to that, and we can cause salvation to the world. You've got to give your loyalty to us. If you look for those signs of people trying to convince you that we are the true ones, we are the right ones, they are wrong, we are right. That to me, that is one of the biggest red flags that's out there. And if somebody is trying to get you to turn from those that you love and to that this is the one way, the only answer, the right answer, the more they say this is the way, the right way, the only way, that's, I think, one of the biggest red flags. There's a lot of things to look for, but I think that's one of the biggest ones.
Agreed.
It's interesting. So it started bringing up in my mind news channels.
Politics.
Some of the news channels out there, we're the only trusted source.
Right.
I'm thinking,
yes.
Right.
That's a whole other show.
That's right. But I mean, you see it so much clear as day with politics, because
politicians are constantly doing
life isn't that easy. It's not this way or that way. It's everything in between.
There's so much complexity, and
so much.
And complexity is beautiful. And we also we're part of the information age, so the resources are out there to look at both sides, and typically science-based, evidence-based thinking, critical thinking, wants to be proven wrong. I mean, if you have a theory, you want it to be right, you hope it's right. But true scientific research, true critical thinking wants to have their colleagues rip apart their theory, because that will help understand whether or not there is truth in it. And but that doesn't happen in organizations or doctrines. They'll just say that God said. God said this is right. Mm-hmm. And that's the only defense, and it's the big one,
Totally. I guess it would be anybody, including doctors, that are trying to create a dependency.
Oh,
yes.
Anyone, it could be anything. As if someone's trying to create a dependency on them for you, that should make you stop.
That's a warning. Yes, I think that is a red flag. Yeah.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Well, because I think of psychologists. No offense. Some out there do that, right? They want a dependency, and not all. I'm just saying. Someone would be very, very vulnerable to that, and would have to be very coherent in looking for those red flags. So
if we can teach young people to use critical thinking,
yes,
and to understand, to give the tool, instead of the tools of manipulation being able to take advantage of young people, if we can provide tools like critical thinking, collaborative tools, communication tools, ways to understand cultural differences, that's a really good toolbox to have, because then you're able to move through this world in a way that will allow you to communicate with people who are different than you, and to use critical thinking when doing so, and to evaluate whether or not someone is trying to take advantage of you or to actually help you be better at what you do. There's a big difference, somebody trying to challenge you, like a good teacher, to think think more and
Yes.
would really look harder at the questions about life than someone telling you just believe in me.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah, you want to encourage individual thought in a way that gives people permission and the self-esteem to trust in their own instincts and knowledge and perception on things and take it from there. You don't hear that narrative anywhere at all.
Well,
It
that's the
seems
sad
like-
thing. We constantly get manipulated by everybody,
Yeah.
good or
Yeah,
bad.
you just see it more. I mean, I think there are people, really good people out there trying to teach this, trying to teach critical thinking and trying to help people, young people understand and to have more purpose in life and to have more opportunities to better themselves. Michael Shermer, I know you just interviewed him recently, talks about being optimistic about that we're evolving in a good way, and I totally agree with him, is that we are evolving in a way that is better, where we are as humans, I think, moving more toward a place where we will see that we are us, that we're all us, not them and us, but that we are all us. We're all in it together. We have to solve some of these problems together. We all have to figure out how to deal with global warming and poverty and war. And so if we all work together at it and don't create these us and them, we'll have a lot better chance at solving these problems. And I do think that we are heading in that direction.
That's
my
wonderful.
Yeah.
Any more questions for her?
I probably have a million questions. Totally a little different. I'm just going to ask you this question. And do you ever see people with disassociative personality disorder after the fact? Have you come across that? I do know someone who has this kind of unique disorder, and it was from her adolescence age being exposed to cults. Now, when I say cult, I mean like a satanic type. You know what I mean? So there's a little more. But have you come across this at all?
Well, I can just use my own personal story. It took me a long time to recover from what I went through. The cognitive dissonance that happens and feeling like when I first realized that Sun Myung Moon isn't the Messiah. And so where did that leave me? I had joined at 17. I was 21 now, and I couldn't really go home. I was a young adult now, and I didn't really know how I felt about anything. I had been told how to view every part of the world, even down to music and clothing and everything. And so I went through a long period of having to try to figure out who I was and how to put myself together. And thank goodness I had a really good counselor for a while that helped me sort things through. But I think that it is traumatic, and it does have ramifications that are long lasting. And I think if someone has been through something like that, it takes a while to heal from it and to figure out who you really are.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yep. Well said.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Benscoter, again, for being on The Circle. I know a lot of people are going to want to know, where do we get a hold of you? They want to know about your organization. Can you tell us where to go? ownyourbrain.org is my website, and I'm going to be doing, this fall, I'm going to be taking off for 8 months. I'm just leaving everything behind, and I'm going to be interviewing people for a YouTube channel who've been in one of 5 different categories, either in a political organization, a religious organization, in a domestic violence type situation, in gangs, or abused by some business scam or fraud, and putting those interviews on with the lens focused on that intersection of manipulation and vulnerability. And so I'll be looking for people who've been through these kinds of things to interview and put on the YouTube channel. That's happening this fall, and I'll be doing it for a good part of a year, traveling all over the country. And so I'm looking for people to talk to and organizations that are grassroots that are working with those most at risk. And you can find my book on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And so please, let me know if there's something I can do for an organization or person, or how I can help. Wonderful. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always fun to have you here. Author of Shoes of a Servant, Diane Benscoter. Website, ownyourownbrain.org. We'll definitely be waiting for those YouTube clips to come out in a few months. I can't wait to see that. Thank you so much again for being on the circle. Thank you. Remember, our model is simple. Wherever there's psychology involved, we're going to be there, and we're not the only ones. See you next time.